At the reunion, he said, "I never lied to you." Then I showed the photos from her balcony. Time has passed, but the taste of doubt never left. Grace Monroe, 33, blonde, poised, and composed, arrives at a boutique hotel for her college reunion in Savannah, Georgia. Among familiar faces and uneasy memories, there he is, Liam Carrington, the man who once promised loyalty, then left her alone, pregnant, at 22. He never met her daughter, never answered her messages, vanished as if nothing had happened. During the toast, under the golden lights and faux nostalgic compliments, Liam beckons her closer, his voice low, brimming with the entitlement of a man who believes he's moved on. "I never lied to you, Grace." Because this isn't just a story about abandonment. It's about a woman who raised her child on her own and who didn't return to forgive, but to show she no longer needed anyone's approval. Stay tuned to see what happens when truth meets reunion, and subscribe for raw stories about empowerment, reckoning, and resilience. Chapter 1: The Return. The summer heat clung to Savannah's historic district like an unwelcome guest, refusing to yield even as evening approached. Grace Monroe adjusted the thin gold bracelet on her wrist, a gift from her daughter on her last birthday, and checked her reflection in the boutique hotel's ornate lobby mirror. At 33, her blonde hair fell in soft waves around a face that had learned to mask vulnerability with poise. She wore a navy blue dress that whispered elegance rather than scream for attention, much like the life she had carefully constructed over the past decade. "Ms. Monroe, your keycard." The concierge smiled with practiced warmth. "The Magnolia Suite has been prepared as requested. The reunion reception begins at 8 in the Charleston Ballroom." Grace nodded, accepting the key with manicured fingers that belied the countless hours she'd spent building her financial consulting firm from scratch. "Thank you." Her heels clicked against marble as she crossed the lobby, each step bringing her closer to a confrontation 11 years in the making. Not that anyone else would view tonight as anything but a standard college reunion. Classmates from Riverside University's class of 2014, gathering to compare lives, careers, marriages, divorces, and the inevitable passage of time. But Grace knew better. Somewhere in this hotel, probably rehearsing some charming anecdote about his rise through the ranks of his father's investment firm, was Liam Carrington, the man who once promised her the world, then left her alone, at 22, pregnant and suddenly invisible to the future they'd planned together. The elevator doors closed with a soft chime, and Grace exhaled. "You're not here for him," she reminded herself, the words a mantra she'd repeated throughout the 3-hour drive from Atlanta. "You're here for you." The Magnolia Suite offered a balcony overlooking Forsyth Park, its famous fountain illuminated against the approaching darkness. Grace stepped outside, the humid air immediately enveloping her. Below, couples strolled hand in hand, tourists snapped photos, and locals walked dogs along familiar paths. Ordinary life continuing as it always had in this picturesque corner of Georgia. Her phone buzzed. A text from Olivia. "Did you make it? Hotel nice? Remember our deal. No working this weekend unless it's to make that Bennett guy jealous with how awesome your company is doing." Grace smiled. Her daughter's perception had always been unnervingly accurate, even at 10 years old. Though Grace had never shared the full story of Liam's abandonment, Olivia somehow understood that this reunion carried weight beyond mere nostalgia. "Hotel is beautiful," she typed back, "and I promise to casually mention the Forbes feature at least once." Setting her phone aside, Grace unpacked methodically. Her reunion outfit hung in the closet, a red dress that struck the perfect balance between sophisticated and statement-making. Beside it, she placed the leather portfolio containing documents she'd debated bringing until the very last minute. A knock at her door interrupted. Grace Monroe, open up before I cause a scene in this fancy hallway. The familiar voice brought an immediate smile. Grace swung the door open to reveal Meredith Chen, her former roommate and the one friend who'd remained constant through everything. "You look exactly the same," Meredith declared, stepping in for a tight hug. At 5'2", her energetic presence had always seemed to occupy more space than her physical form. Except richer, obviously. That watch is not playing around. Grace laughed. "Says the woman wearing Louboutins to a college reunion." Fair point. Meredith flopped onto the king-sized bed. "So, have you seen him yet?" The question needed no clarification. Grace shook her head, moving to pour them both sparkling water from the minibar. "Not yet. Is he here?" "Arrived an hour ago. With the wife. Stephanie something. Very Connecticut country club. You know the type. Tennis bracelet, perfect blowout, laughs at all his jokes." Grace kept her expression neutral. "I expected as much." "You sure you want to do this? We could skip the whole thing, order room service, and trash talk our former classmates based entirely on their Instagram profiles." Grace's smile was small but determined. "I didn't build a 7-figure business by running from uncomfortable situations." Meredith studied her friend's face. "This isn't about business, Grace." "Isn't it, though?" Grace turned to the window, watching the Spanish moss sway in the evening breeze. She turned back, her eyes clear and focused. 11 years ago, Liam decided I wasn't worth staying for, that our child wasn't worth acknowledging. He walked away to protect his family's legacy and his father's approval. Now, I've built something he and his father would beg to partner with, something I did entirely without the Carrington name or connections.
Revenge served financially solvent. I like it. Meredith raised her glass in a toast. To making them regret underestimating you. Grace clinked her glass against her friend's. To never needing their validation again. The Charleston ballroom sparkled with string lights and nostalgia. Photographs from their college years lined the entrance, faces young and unaware of what lay ahead. Grace paused at one. The spring formal, 2013. There she was, tucked against Liam's side, his arm possessively around her waist. They'd been dating for 2 years by then, planning futures around each other with the certainty of youth. "Ancient history," she murmured, straightening her shoulders before stepping into the crowded room. Conversations paused as she entered, heads turning to follow her progress. Grace Monroe was no longer the scholarship student from rural Georgia, but the founder and CEO of Monroe Financial Strategies, a boutique firm whose client list included tech innovators and sustainable energy pioneers. Her recent feature in Forbes 40 Under 40 had cemented her reputation as someone who'd not only survived, but thrived after walking away from traditional investment paths. "Grace!" Former classmates converged, offering compliments and business cards in equal measure. She navigated the social currents with practiced ease, accepting champagne from a passing waiter while scanning the room. And then she saw him. Liam Carrington stood near the bar, one hand in the pocket of his tailored suit, the other holding a tumbler of amber liquid. At 34, he remained unfairly handsome. Dark hair now styled more conservatively, shoulders broader beneath expensive fabric. Beside him stood a slender woman with honey blonde hair, her hand resting possessively on his arm. Their eyes met across the room, and for a moment the years collapsed. Grace felt a ghost of that old ache, not for him, but for the girl she'd been, who'd believed his promises so completely. Liam's expression shifted from surprise to something unreadable. He whispered something to his wife and began making his way towards Grace. "Incoming," Meredith muttered. "Want me to spill my drink on him? It's not too late to choose violence." Grace squeezed her friend's arm. "I've got this." Liam reached them, his cologne the same as it had been a decade ago. "Grace Monroe,"
His voice carried that familiar confidence, the certainty that his presence was always welcome. "You look incredible." "Liam," Grace's smile didn't reach her eyes. "It's been a while."
Too long. He glanced at Meredith, offering a nod of recognition before returning his attention to Grace. "I saw the Forbes piece. Congratulations. You've done remarkably well for yourself." The slight pause didn't escape her notice. Remarkably well for someone like you, was what he meant. Someone without family connections or inherited wealth. "Thank you." Grace took a deliberate sip of champagne. "Your father's firm is still thriving, I assume?" A flicker of something, annoyance, discomfort, crossed his features. "Carrington Investment Group is stronger than ever. I was made partner 3 years ago." "How nice for you." Her tone remained pleasant. "Family business has its advantages." Before he could respond, the event coordinator called for everyone's attention. The class president was about to give a welcome speech, followed by a toast to absent friends. Liam leaned closer, his breath warm against her ear. "We should catch up properly, later." Grace stepped back slightly, reclaiming her space. "Should we?" His eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. "There are things you don't understand, Grace. Things I never got to explain." 11 years is a long time to find your voice, Liam. The toast began, glasses raising to memories and futures alike. As classmates cheered and reminisced, Liam's gaze remained fixed on Grace, his expression a complex mixture of regret and determination. "I never lied to you, Grace," he said, voice low beneath the ambient noise. She met his eyes, unflinching. "That might be the biggest lie of all." If you're enjoying this story of confrontation, truth, and a woman's journey to reclaim her power, make sure to subscribe to our channel. Chapter 2 reveals the painful history between Grace and Liam and the shocking photos that will change everything. Don't miss it. Hit that subscribe button now. Chapter 2: The Truth in Photographs. The reunion's formal dinner concluded with laughter and the clink of dessert spoons against china plates. Grace had strategically positioned herself at a table with former classmates from the business program, people who knew her professionally now, rather than as Liam Carrington's college girlfriend. Throughout the meal, she felt his eyes on her from across the room, where he sat with his wife and the former lacrosse team members who'd once been his constant entourage. "So, you actually turned down an acquisition offer from Meridian Capital? That's practically unheard of for a firm your size," asked Jason Kwan, now a successful venture capitalist in San Francisco. Grace dabbed her lips with a napkin. "Their vision didn't align with mine. Monroe Financial was built on certain principles: transparency, sustainability, ethical investment. Meridian wanted our client list and our methodology, but would have dismantled everything else."
"That takes guts," said another classmate, "and independence." "Independence has always been my strongest asset." Grace smiled, aware that Liam had excused himself from his table and was now approaching. "If you'll excuse me for a moment." She rose gracefully, intercepting Liam before he could reach their table. "Walk with me?" she suggested, gesturing toward the terrace doors. Better to have this conversation away from curious eyes and eager ears. The hotel's terrace overlooked a manicured garden, string lights casting a gentle glow over stone pathways and flowering shrubs. The humid night air carried the scent of jasmine and distant thunderstorms. Grace led them to a quiet corner, maintaining a careful distance as they stood side by side at the stone balustrade. "Your wife seems lovely," Grace began, her tone deliberately neutral. Liam's fingers tapped against the stone. Stephanie. Yes. She comes from a good family. Connecticut. Her father's in shipping. How convenient for the Carrington portfolio. His jaw tightened. That's not fair, Grace. Isn't it? She turned to face him fully, studying the face she'd once known better than her own. Tell me, does she know about me? About us? She knows I had a serious girlfriend in college. And does she know about Olivia? The name hung between them, heavy with 11 years of absence. Liam's expression shifted, discomfort evident in the tightening around his eyes. I've respected your privacy, he said finally. What would be the point of telling her about complications from the past? Grace felt a cold clarity wash over her. My daughter is not a complication, Liam. She's a brilliant, kind, funny 10-year-old who deserved to know her father. You made that decision for both of us when you didn't tell me you were keeping it. The words hit like a physical blow. Grace took a step back, her hand instinctively reaching for the balustrade to steady herself. When you didn't tell me I was keeping it? She repeated, her voice dangerously quiet. Is that really the version you've been telling yourself all these years? Liam had the grace to look uncomfortable, but pressed on. You know how things were then. My father's expectations, the family legacy. I was 23, about to start at Wharton. We weren't ready for a child. No, you weren't ready. And instead of having the decency to say that to my face, you disappeared. 3 weeks after I told you I was pregnant, you stopped answering my calls. Your roommate told me you'd gone to Europe with your parents. Your number changed. Your email bounced back. I needed time to think. You had 11 years, Liam. The words cut like glass. I left 27 messages. I wrote you letters. I even went to your parents' house in Charleston, where your mother told me you were focusing on your future and that I should be reasonable about expectations. Liam ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, a gesture so familiar it made Grace's chest ache with the absurdity of time, how some things changed completely while others remained frozen. My father threatened to cut me off completely if I derailed my life over a mistake, he said finally. You know what he's like. He controls everything. The money, the connections, the future. Without him, I'd have nothing. And with him, you still ended up with nothing that actually matters. Grace's voice softened with something like pity. You chose his approval over everything else. Over me. Over your own child. That's not... He stopped, frustrated. You don't understand what it's like to have that kind of pressure. The Carrington name, the expectations. My whole life was mapped out before I was born. Grace laughed, the sound brittle in the night air. While you were hiding behind your father's expectations, I was working 2 jobs through my pregnancy. I was finishing my MBA with a newborn. I was building a life and a future for our daughter with no safety net, no family money, no famous last name to open doors. Liam's expression darkened. I offered financial support. When I found out you'd had the baby, 3 years later, Grace corrected, you sent a check and a legal document that would have required me to never publicly acknowledge you as Olivia's father, a document that would have given you 0 responsibility and 0 rights. Her smile was cold. I returned it uncashed. I was trying to do the right thing. No, you were trying to erase a problem. But Olivia isn't a problem to be solved, Liam. She's a person who deserved better than a father who could pretend she didn't exist. Silence stretched between them, filled only by distant laughter from inside and the gentle symphony of cicadas in the garden below. "You've done well for yourself," Liam said finally, gesturing vaguely toward the dinner they'd left behind. "Monroe Financial is impressive. My father actually mentioned your Forbes profile. He didn't make the connection, of course, but he noted your client acquisition strategy was innovative." The absurdity of his attempt at a compliment almost made Grace laugh again. "I didn't build my company to impress Carrington men." "Then why did you come tonight? If you hate me so much, why show up at all?"
Grace considered the question, the real answer more complex than she could articulate, even to herself. "Perhaps I needed to see that walking away from you was the best thing that ever happened to me." Liam flinched as if she'd struck him. "You don't mean that." "I built something from nothing, Liam. Something that's mine, that no one can take away or control. Something that makes a difference." Pride crept into her voice, well-earned and unashamed. "Last year, Monroe Financial helped fund 6 women-owned sustainable energy startups that traditional firms wouldn't touch. We've created a scholarship program for single mothers pursuing business degrees. Our client portfolio has outperformed major investment banks 3 years running." "I've seen the numbers," he admitted. "Your growth is remarkable. In fact," he hesitated, then forged ahead, "that's partly why I wanted to talk to you. There might be an opportunity for collaboration. Carrington is looking to diversify, to appeal to younger investors with different priorities. Your expertise in sustainable ventures could be valuable to us." Grace stared at him, momentarily speechless. "You want to do business after everything?" "Business is business, Grace. We were always good together professionally, and the potential synergy between our firms could be tremendously profitable for both of us." The cool calculation in his tone made everything suddenly, painfully clear. 11 years, and he still didn't understand what he'd done or what she'd become in his absence. "I need to show you something," Grace said, her decision made. "Meet me in the garden in 20 minutes. Before he could respond, she turned and walked away, her red dress a splash of defiance against the night. Back in her suite, Grace retrieved the leather portfolio from her luggage. Inside were the documents she'd debated bringing: photographs, letters, records of a life Liam had chosen to ignore. She selected several key pieces, placing them carefully in a smaller folio before stepping onto her balcony. The night had cooled slightly, a gentle breeze stirring the moss-draped oaks that lined the park. Below, she could see Liam waiting by the garden fountain, checking his watch with the impatience of a man accustomed to others accommodating his schedule. Her phone buzzed, a text from Meredith. "You okay? Saw you leave with LC. Need backup?" Grace smiled at her friend's protectiveness. "All good. Finishing what I started." Taking a deep breath, she made her way downstairs and out to the garden. Liam straightened when he saw her approach, his expression a mixture of curiosity and wariness. "You were beginning to think you'd changed your mind." "I never start things I don't intend to finish." Grace gestured to a stone bench away from the main pathways. "Shall we?" They sat, the portfolio balanced on her lap. For a moment, Grace simply studied him, this man who had once been the center of her world, now a stranger in familiar packaging. "You said you never lied to me," she began, her voice steady. "Let's test that claim." She opened the portfolio and removed the first photograph, passing it to him without comment. It showed a younger Liam, perhaps 24 or 25, outside a restaurant in New York, arm in arm with a dark-haired woman who was decidedly not his current wife. "What is this supposed to prove?" he asked, frowning. "That I dated after we broke up?" "Look at the date stamp," Grace said quietly. His eyes flickered to the corner of the photograph. April 15, 2014. 2 months after Grace had told him she was pregnant, 1 month before he'd stopped answering her calls. "This doesn't—" Grace handed him another photograph. The same woman,
different location, then another, Liam entering an apartment building, the woman waiting by the door, all dated during the time he'd claimed to be thinking about their situation before his supposed departure to Europe. Where did you get these? His voice had lost its smooth confidence. It doesn't matter, Grace's expression remained neutral. What matters is that while I was struggling with morning sickness and trying to reach you, you were already moving on. You weren't in Europe with your parents. You weren't thinking about our future. You were creating a new life that didn't include me or your child. She removed one final photograph, the most damning of all. Liam, his father, and the dark-haired woman at a charity gala. The date stamp? 1 week after Grace had made that desperate visit to the Carrington home, only to be told Liam was unavailable. Her name was Vanessa Aldridge, daughter of Senator Aldridge, a much more suitable match for the Carrington heir than a scholarship student from nowhere, Georgia. She closed the portfolio. You were already following your father's plan while stringing me along with silence. Liam's face had drained of color. How long have you had these? Does it matter? The point is, you didn't just abandon us, you crafted an elaborate lie to avoid responsibility. You let me believe you were struggling with a difficult decision when you'd already made your choice. It wasn't like that, but his protest lacked conviction. It was exactly like that. Grace's voice remained calm, though her hands trembled slightly. You said tonight that I don't understand pressure or expectations, but the truth is, you never understood courage or integrity. She stood, gathering the photographs and returning them to the portfolio. I didn't come here for an apology, Liam. I came to close a chapter that's remained unfinished for too long. He looked up at her, his expression a complex mixture of shame and defiance. And what about Olivia? Don't I have a right to know my daughter? The question hung between them, weighted with missed birthdays and absent father-daughter dances, with Christmases and first days of school that could never be reclaimed.
Rights are earned, not granted, Grace said finally. You chose not to be her father 11 years ago. That choice had consequences. People change, Grace. I've changed. She studied him, seeing not the college boyfriend who'd promised her forever, but the man who'd calculated the cost of that promise and found it too high to pay. Have you really? She asked. Because from where I stand, you're still making decisions based on what benefits Carrington Investment Group rather than what's right. In the distance, thunder rumbled, a summer storm approaching, promising temporary relief from the Georgia heat. Grace checked her watch. It's getting late, and I have an early flight tomorrow. Olivia has a science competition on Monday. Pride softened her features. She's built a sustainable irrigation system that uses 60% less water than traditional methods. At 10, she's already changing the world. Liam's expression cracked slightly. She sounds remarkable. She is. Grace stepped back. Goodbye, Liam. As she turned to leave, his voice stopped her. What about the business proposal? Monroe Financial and Carrington could do incredible things together. Grace looked back at him, a small smile playing at her lips. That's the thing about building something on your own terms, Liam. You get to choose who you partner with. And I choose to work with people who understand that integrity isn't negotiable. With that, she walked away, leaving him alone by the fountain as the first heavy drops of rain began to fall. Chapter 3. The Final Balance. Morning arrived with cleansed air and sunlight filtering through parted curtains. The overnight storm had cleared, leaving Savannah refreshed and glistening. Grace stood on her suite's balcony, coffee in hand, watching early joggers navigate puddles in Forsyth Park below. She'd slept surprisingly well, better than she had in years, as if confronting Liam had lifted a weight she'd grown so accustomed to carrying that she'd forgotten it was there. A soft knock at her door announced Meredith's arrival. Her friend entered carrying 2 paper bags from a local bakery, hair still damp from a shower. I come bearing Southern carbs and gossip, Meredith announced.
setting the bags on the small table by the window. The gossip is free, but the peach fritters cost me $8 each, so you'd better appreciate them. Grace smiled, accepting one of the pastries. At those prices, they'd better change my life. Speaking of life-changing, Meredith settled into a chair, eyeing Grace curiously. Several people noticed your garden tete-a-tete with Liam last night, followed by his dramatic solo return in the rain looking like someone had just told him his trust fund had been donated to environmental activists. That's oddly specific.
I'm a screenwriter now. Specificity is my job. Meredith took a bite of her fritter. So, did you show him the photos? Grace nodded, settling across from her friend, and returned with my dignity intact, if that's what you're wondering. Never doubted it. Meredith studied her. How did it feel, finally confronting him after all this time? Grace considered the question, looking out at the sun-dappled park. Less cathartic than I expected. More clarifying. She sipped her coffee. It was like finally solving a puzzle that's been bothering you for years, only to realize the finished picture isn't particularly interesting. Ouch. Poor Liam. Poor Liam, who's still chasing his father's approval at 34, who married the right kind of wife from the right kind of family, who sees my company's success as a potential acquisition target rather than the achievement it represents. Grace shook her head. I don't think I'm the one who should feel sorry for him. Meredith smiled around a mouthful of pastry. That's my girl. So, what happens now? Back to Atlanta and business as usual? Not quite. There's one more thing I need to do before we leave. The Carrington Financial Group's Savannah office occupied the top 3 floors of a renovated historic building on River Street. Its glass and steel interior contrasted sharply with the preserved brick exterior. Modern ambition wrapped in traditional packaging, much like the Carrington approach to business itself. Grace smoothed the lapels of her tailored cream suit as she approached the reception desk, portfolio in hand. She had made no appointment, but that was by design. Good morning, she greeted the receptionist. I'm here to see Edward Carrington. The young woman looked up, professional smile firmly in place. Do you have an appointment, Miss Monroe? Grace Monroe. And no, I don't have an appointment, but I believe Mr. Carrington will want to see me. The receptionist's eyes widened slightly at the name. Monroe Financial had made enough waves in investment circles that recognition was becoming common. One moment, please. While the young woman made a discreet call, Grace surveyed the reception area. Photographs of Carrington's projects lined the walls, interspersed with awards and framed magazine features. In one corner stood a family portrait, Edward Carrington flanked by his wife and son, all 3 impeccably dressed against a neutral backdrop. Liam looked perhaps 25 in the image, his smile confident, but his eyes somehow empty. Ms. Monroe, the receptionist's voice drew her attention. Mr. Carrington has a few minutes available. Jessica will show you to his office. An assistant materialized to lead Grace through the sleek hallways to a corner office with sweeping views of the Savannah River. Edward Carrington rose from behind an imposing mahogany desk as she entered. A tall man in his 60s with silver hair and the same angular features as his son, though harder, more definitively carved by ambition and time. Miss Monroe, his handshake was firm, assessing. This is an unexpected pleasure. Your reputation precedes you. Mr. Carrington, Grace accepted the offered seat across from his desk. Thank you for seeing me without notice. When the founder of Monroe Financial appears unannounced, one makes time. His smile didn't reach his eyes, a Carrington family trait apparently. I understand you attended Riverside with my son. He mentioned seeing you at the reunion last night. He did. Grace kept her expression neutral. How interesting. Did he mention our conversation? Only that you've built quite an impressive operation. Edward leaned back in his chair. Though, I confess, I've been following your progress for some time. Your sustainable energy portfolio in particular has performed remarkably well in a volatile market. Grace set her portfolio on her lap. That's actually related to why I'm here. Oh? Interest sharpened his gaze.
Liam suggested there might be potential for collaboration between our firms, though I must say I would have expected a more traditional approach to such discussions. I'm not here to discuss a collaboration, Mr. Carrington. Grace's voice remained pleasant, though her spine straightened almost imperceptibly. I'm here to inform you of an acquisition. Confusion crossed his features. I don't understand. Grace opened her portfolio and removed a document, sliding it across the polished desk surface. Monroe Financial has acquired controlling interest in Meridian Capital. Edward Carrington stared at the document, then back at Grace. Meridian is 3 times your size. Was 3 times our size, she corrected gently. The deal closed last week. We've kept it quiet until now, but the announcement goes public tomorrow morning. His expression hardened as the implications registered. Meridian Capital was Carrington Financial Group's largest competitor in the Southeast. More importantly, Meridian held nearly 30% of the commercial real estate development contracts that Carrington had been pursuing for years. How did you manage this? The question emerged more accusatory than curious. I smiled, carefully, strategically, with the backing of investors who believe in our vision and our methods. I paused, and with the advantage of being consistently underestimated. Edward Carrington's jaw tightened, a flash of anger quickly controlled. And you've come to gloat? That seems beneath someone of your professional caliber. Not to gloat, Mr. Carrington, to deliver a message. Grace removed another document from her portfolio. This is a list of Carrington Group's current holdings in companies with documented labor violations, environmental damage citations, and discriminatory hiring practices. She placed it beside the acquisition notice. As Meridian's new controlling partner, Monroe Financial will be divesting from these ventures within 90 days. The color drained from Edward Carrington's face. You can't do that. Those partnerships are worth millions. Billions collectively. I'm aware of their value. I'm also aware of their cost. Grace's voice remained measured. The divestiture will be gradual and responsible. We have no desire to create market instability or job losses, but it will happen. This is about Liam, isn't it? Some sort of revenge for ancient history. Grace studied him, seeing in his features the architect of so much pain, not just hers, but Liam's as well, in a different way. A man who valued legacy and appearance above all else, including his son's happiness and integrity. This isn't about Liam, she said softly. It's not even about what happened 11 years ago. It's about the future I'm building for my daughter, for everyone's daughters. A future where ethical business practices aren't just marketing slogans, but fundamental principles. She stood, gathering her remaining documents. Monroe Financial will be announcing a new scholarship fund next month for single parents pursuing business degrees, with additional support for childcare and living expenses. Her smile was genuine now. I'd like to name it after my daughter, Olivia, your granddaughter. The words hung in the air between them, a truth finally spoken aloud in this temple to Carrington ambition. Edward's expression froze. You told me the situation was resolved years ago. Is that what abandoning a pregnant woman is called in Carrington terminology? A situation that gets resolved? Grace shook her head. You taught your son that some problems can be erased with enough money and privilege. But people aren't problems, Mr. Carrington. And some things can't be bought or controlled. Edward rose slowly, his height meant to intimidate. You come into my office and threaten my company's interests. You announce an acquisition deliberately engineered to damage our position. And now you claim my son has a child I've never been told about? If this is some elaborate revenge scheme, it's not revenge, Mr. Carrington. It's consequence. Grace remained standing, her posture relaxed but unwavering. Liam chose his approval over his own child. That was his decision to make. But choices have ripple effects that extend far beyond the moment they're made. She removed a final photograph from her portfolio and placed it on his desk. A school portrait of a smiling girl with Liam's dark hair and the same determined chin as the man standing before her. The resemblance was undeniable.
This is Olivia. She's brilliant, compassionate, and astonishingly resilient. She's also the reason I built Monroe Financial, to create a world where her opportunities wouldn't be limited by other people's expectations or traditions. Edward stared at the photograph, something complicated passing across his features, a flicker of recognition, perhaps, or regret. "He has his eyes," he said finally, his voice altered. "Yes, she does." He looked up at Grace, the businessman's mask momentarily slipping to reveal something more human beneath. Does she know about her father? She knows he wasn't ready to be a parent. She knows that doesn't diminish her worth or potential. Grace's expression softened slightly. She also knows that families come in many forms and that sometimes the strongest ones are those we build for ourselves. Edward sank back into his chair, suddenly looking older than his years. Why tell me this now, after all this time? Because the past doesn't define us, Mr. Carrington. Our choices in the present do. Grace gathered her portfolio. The Meridian acquisition stands. The divestiture will proceed. But I'm not here to destroy Carrington Group, only to redirect its influence toward more constructive ends. She placed a business card on his desk. If you're interested in discussing how Carrington might evolve to meet the ethical standards of the next generation of investors, my door is open. Not for Liam's sake, or even for yours, but for Olivia's. She deserves to inherit a world better than the one we've made. Edward picked up the card, turning it between his fingers. And if I'm not interested, then Monroe Meridian will continue to reshape the market without you. Grace moved toward the door. But I think you're smarter than that, Mr. Carrington. You didn't build a financial empire by ignoring changing winds. At the threshold, she paused. For what it's worth, I believe Liam wanted to be better than the path you laid out for him. He just never found the courage to create his own. The afternoon sun warmed the cobblestones of River Street as Grace emerged from the Carrington building. She took a deep breath of salt-tinged air, feeling lighter than she had in years. Meredith waited at a cafe across the street, sunglasses pushed up into her hair, and iced coffee halfway to her lips. Well, how did it go with Carrington Sr.? Grace slid into the chair opposite her friend. About as expected. Shock, denial, anger, consideration, in that order. And the big reveal about Olivia? I think it actually affected him. There was a moment where he looked at her photo and I saw something. Recognition, maybe, or the realization of what he'd lost. Serves him right. Meredith stirred her drink. So what happens now? Think he'll call the number you left? Grace smiled, tilting her face toward the sunlight. I have no idea. And for the first time in 11 years, I'm completely at peace with that uncertainty. Her phone chimed with a text message from Olivia. Mom, Principal Jeffrey says my irrigation project is being entered in the state science competition. Also, I'm out of granola, and can we get a dog? Love you. Grace laughed, showing the message to Meredith. This is what matters. This wonderful, chaotic, beautiful life we've built. 2 wonderful, chaotic, beautiful lives. Meredith raised her glass in a toast. And to women who don't need anyone's approval to create them. As they clinked glasses, Grace's phone rang, an Atlanta number she didn't recognize. She answered with her professional voice. Grace Monroe speaking? The voice on the other end belonged to the features editor at Atlanta Business Chronicle. Miss Monroe, we've just received an advance notice about Monroe Financial's acquisition of Meridian Capital. We'd like to feature you in our Women Reshaping Finance issue next month. Would you be available for an interview? Grace caught Meredith's eye and smiled. Yes, she said, watching a cargo ship glide down the Savannah River toward the open sea. I think I would. Back in Atlanta 3 days later,
Grace stood in the doorway of Olivia's bedroom, watching her daughter hunched over her science project. Diagrams and calculations covered the desk, the focused intensity in the girl's expression so familiar it made Grace's heart ache with recognition. "Hey, scientist, it's getting late." Olivia looked up, her dark hair falling across one eye in a way that momentarily took Grace's breath away. The gesture was pure Liam. "Just 5 more minutes. I almost have the flow rate calculations figured out." Grace smiled. 5 minutes, then teeth brushing and bed. No negotiations. "Deal." Olivia returned to her work, then paused. "Mom, how was your reunion? You didn't really tell me much when you got back." Grace leaned against the doorframe, considering the question. "It was clarifying." "Did you see any old friends?" "I did. And some people who used to be important to me, but aren't anymore." Olivia tilted her head, studying her mother with that perceptive gaze that seemed to see straight through adult evasions. "Did you see my dad?" The question hung in the air between them. In 11 years, Olivia had rarely asked about her father, a deliberate absence Grace had neither emphasized nor concealed, simply acknowledging when asked that he wasn't ready to be a parent when she was born.
"Yes," Grace said finally. "I did see him." "Was he nice?" Grace moved into the room, sitting on the edge of Olivia's bed. "He was who he's always been, someone who makes choices based on what other people expect rather than what he believes is right." Olivia considered this. "That sounds sad." "I think it is sad." "Did you tell him about me?" "He already knew about you, sweetheart. He just wasn't brave enough to be the father you deserve." Olivia nodded, absorbing this with the remarkable resilience that had always characterized her. "That's okay. We've done pretty well without him, right?" Grace felt her throat tighten. "We've done amazingly well, you and me against the world. And Aunt Meredith," Olivia added with a grin. "And Mrs. Patel next door. And Grandma Jenkins. And my whole science club." Grace laughed, leaning forward to tuck a strand of hair behind her daughter's ear. "You're right. We're not against the world. We've built our own world, haven't we?" "The best one," Olivia agreed. She hesitated, then asked, "Do you think he'll ever want to meet me? My dad?" Grace considered the question carefully. "I don't know, sweetheart, but what I do know is that his choices don't define your worth. Whether he's in your life or not doesn't change how extraordinary you are." Olivia nodded, seeming satisfied with this answer. 5 more minutes on my calculations?" 5 more minutes, Grace confirmed, dropping a kiss on her daughter's head before standing. Then bedtime. In the hallway, she paused by the large window overlooking the Atlanta skyline. Somewhere out there were the illuminated offices of Monroe Financial, soon to be Monroe Meridian. Somewhere much further, in Savannah, was the Carrington building where another chapter had finally closed. Her phone buzzed with an email notification, a response from the attorney handling the Scholarship Foundation paperwork. The Olivia Monroe Scholarship for Single Parents was officially approved. Funding would begin with the next academic year. She smiled, watching the city lights shimmer against the night sky. The future stretched before them, bright with possibility and unburdened by the weight of the past. Whatever came next, whether Edward Carrington called, whether Liam ever found the courage to meet his daughter, whether Monroe Meridian transformed the financial landscape as she envisioned, she and Olivia would face it together, on their own terms.